interviewing. You know, that's what they doing. Stick around. It's about to get all roomy up in here. Remote Ruby starts now.
So since Jason left, I apparently don't have our new time on my calendar. So I get that email that says, Andrew joined your Zoom. Oh, I guess we're recording today. Basically, whenever you join the Zoom is when we record. That's the rules.
Chris, I'm going to make us a calendar event, and I'm going to put the Zoom link on there because every time I have to reopen Discord on my computer to get the link, and that pisses me off.
Oh, yeah.
And
mine lately has been, I go to Zoom, I click that link, the host isn't here yet. And I'm like, but I am the host. And it's like, well, you're not signed in, so you're not the host. No, I got to go sign in and jump around. And then you go to the web to sign in. Then it opens the like Zoom workspace thing. And then also the Zoom call tab. And can they get their stuff together?
Yeah. So I messaged in the Discord an hour ago. Give me 5 minutes, bro. I'm trying to make these tests pass. But I was actually an hour early. But fun fact, next week, I will not have been an hour early because next week will be daylight savings time and my time won't change, but yours will.
Yours doesn't change?
No.
I didn't know that. I thought they all changed in the US.
No, not Arizona, dude. But I will tell you, the Apache tribe, who has a big swath up top right of the state, they do daylight savings time. But there's a smaller tribe that has a reservation inside of that bigger reservation, and they do what the rest of Arizona does. So I have driven up through that corridor of the state before, and it can literally go from 8 to 10, back to 8, back to 10, back to 8 in the span.
What? That's like insane.
Multiple miles. It's hilarious.
So did you know that, because I learned this 2 years ago, 3 years ago or something. I don't remember why I was looking at daylight savings. No, I was just looking at time zone maps. I live in the US. The only time zones that really affect me are like the time zones in the US with people I interact with, or around the globe with people I interact with. Whatever reason, I was just poking around, just checking out how time zones were throughout the world. And like, I had no idea there were time zones that were 15 minutes difference or 30 minutes difference. I thought they were all an hour.
Yeah.
Insane.
They're not straight either. I think that's something that people in their brain are like, oh, well, the time zones are like a straight line I can draw. But that's not true, because if that were true, then New York part of Manhattan would be in one time zone, and then the other part of the island would be in the other. So I can't remember who the authority is on who establishes those boundaries, but they're not straight lines so that chaos doesn't ensue in certain parts of the world.
Fascinating. I had no idea it was that complex. I knew it was like a mess. It's clearly just downright nuts.
I have an update from our last episode.
Ooh, okay. Let's hear it.
So we talked for a good swath of time about managing language versions on your machine.
Ooh, well, I have much to talk about there too, because I've been spending a lot of time with Mize.
Okay, well, perfect. I'm glad you said that, because what I learned this week is it's pronounced mise.
Oh, I did know that.
I did not know that.
It's like mise en place or whatever.
But I'm uncultured and American, so I don't get
But
that.
also, it's like name that, but also the command is mise. And so then you lose the context, and then you're, whatever.
Yeah.
We're Americans. Mise.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast from the creator, and the first thing they said was mise, and I was like, dang.
Mise. Yeah, I got to remember that.
Yeah, no hard I.
Yeah. I love it even more after we were talking about how great it was last week. I have been in the middle of, I'm towards the end, probably, I would say, if I had to guess, 75%, maybe 80% done of the internal updates in Hatchbox to swap it over during a deploy. So the systemd services that we set up have to go load the ASDF environment variables. They have to run with the path set to the shims and have all that wired up. With me, I've gone and replaced all that, which is so freaking great. I can preserve the same files for the ASDF vars. I've renamed the file, but I can still use that. I just write a mies local toml file and then mies local toml and tell it to load that file, which it does like magic. You can reference your variables and other stuff. You can set environment variables directly in there if you want. I think I ended up not doing that for some reason. I forget. It's not very clear, but you can use the standard mies install. The trick is, I think it's whenever your prompt is shown or something, there's some code that runs in there that's what modifies the path.
Yeah, it activates on every new shell session. Yeah.
So that's cool and all, but doesn't work in non-interactive sessions like systemd services.
That depends on where you set it up technically, right? Because...
Well, like for example, we're in systemd services, we have to pass an exact path to an executable to run.
Z profile is what controls that.
You can't do that at all. You basically have to point it directly to a Ruby or Puma or some executable.
You can use shims.
We could. So that's what we're using is shims to point directly to that. We just put the shims directory at the beginning of the path and stuff. Yeah. And so that works well. I have even more and more appreciation for it now. We did the recursive setup with RBM vars and ASDF vars where your current directory has variables, but also your parent directory all the way up to the root of your file system can have those and it will merge them all in, which is sweet. mies will do that as well. It's a little confusing in the docs because some of them say like your mies.toml files, but then like you can have environment ones where it's like mies.production.toml, and then you can also have mies.local.toml, and that will go up the parent directories, but not your regular mies.toml, I guess. So there's a lot of options, but it's just hard to find one place where it's all documented. They're kind of split up in a few different places. But the amount of functionality it has is wild because with RBM vars and ASDF vars, which is just me copying RBM vars for ASDF and hacking it in there, you can just run mies env and it will go spit out all the environment variables like that script that we wrote and used RBM vars and migrated into ASDF. It's just a feature built in. So if we ever need to find all those environment variables, boom, here you go. That was another one that was a little confusing in the docs. The command is documented, but there's no output of the command documented. So you don't actually know what is it doing or what's it going to do until you like start writing configs and setting it up. So it's a little early still in some of the docs, but I imagine that somebody like me who now is very thoroughly looked at a whole bunch of this stuff could go and make some improvements there and stuff. But yeah, I thought we were going to like end up using the env source, which allows you to call a script that exports environment variables, which is exactly what RBM vars does. But we don't need to do that at all because we just load that file and it works like a .env file. Otherwise, those are set the key and value on each line and you're pretty much good to go. The difference is that RBM vars will take one of those files, convert it to export so that on your shell, it's exported appropriately or whatever. But you don't really have to do that with this. It's sweet.
It's pretty nice.
I'm so impressed.
I know some people at Podia have started moving over, but I kind of want to like start adding in some my specific config because previously we're mies. Dang it. Yes. And I'm the one who said that. I want to start adding the actual mies toml like config files instead of just falling back to the tool versions file we have, because that will like open up a more niceties, like adding the bin file to the path and the environment variables.
Yeah.
We have like a thing we do with environment variables, but I saw that mies had encrypted environment variables now. Yes. And I was like, I feel like we could almost replace that entire setup with this. Not that I'm going to, if anyone from my company's listening, please ignore.
Push.
Force doing, and I've been known to. That's my signature, dude. I got into tasks a bit this week with mies because I was looking at them more and more, and I was like, I feel like I have some shell functions. It would just be better to be a task because they're not something I'm only doing these for specific things, like setting up. There were certain GitHub related things I have that I run for setting up repos and stuff like that. These would be perfect for tasks because of the way Mies lets you set up a namespace, almost like a module for your tasks. So I could have a GitHub folder that just has all those tasks related to that. And what's really nice is you can point Mies to a different directory to look for tasks. And because I have a Z functions folder with functions that I auto load into my like ZSH sessions, I can point Mies to that. And Mies also has some syntax niceties they add on top of shell completions. I can't remember the underlying format, but it's documented in the Mies docs. And by doing that, you get really nice autocomplete suggestions when you use them from the terminal because Mies injects all that in. So you can have really nice autocomplete for your shell scripts. And so I've kind of been starting to move over to that. Move some of my stuff over to that.
That's awesome. I didn't look into that feature very much, but I did see the like Mies watch command, which can run tasks automatically whenever something changes or whatever. And well, that's cool because then you don't need to build that into your stuff. That's annoying and painful stuff to do yourself. And if you can just tell it, hey, rebuild the JavaScript or something automatically for me. And the tool we're using for the JavaScript, it doesn't have that feature built in or whatever it is, then you could do that. It seems like with these tasks in the watch command, which is sweet.
And I'm not saying you should replace the already existing tools you use to do that with, but think of...
But like if something doesn't have it...
Well, right. So like you could save a file and like use the Mies watch to automatically lint it. Or for instance... depending on the type of file it is. So yeah, it gives you a lot of capabilities right out of the box.
It's a language agnostic thing too, which is really awesome because you would otherwise implement this with your package JSON, have your scripts in there. You might have some bin scripts in your Rails app. You might have whatever. And this is like generic, completely generic, and it can just run that stuff for you, which is really awesome. Makes it way more portable that way, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like to set up like common tasks or common things across all your developers. You never have to wonder like, oh, how does Andrew run this command compared to so-and-so? Well, it doesn't matter because you just use the Mies task.
Yeah.
Or Mies task.
I'm very, very impressed with it. I think it's going to be a really good thing going forward. I always liked ASDF, but I had that feeling of it being too much, trying to be too flexible or whatever. And the project definitely got to that point of there are a bunch of unofficial things that are maintained by the guy maintaining the language manager itself is busy enough on that. But then Node is changing and then Ruby plugin changes and PHP and whatever. And it's like, how in the world are you going to have that much investment into all these different languages and the way they want to handle things and everything? And that I thought was kind of overwhelming. I'm blown away that Mies is basically the same thing plus a lot more, but it's also like clearly someone's deep expertise. And coming from Heroku history and everything, well, what is a hosting platform like that all about? It's all about the languages and their management and everything. So it makes so much sense that this is incredibly polished, but I'm just looking to get everything migrated over soon. I can't wait.
It's not just experience. Like this is like thoughtful design, terminal design patterns, designing like an API for your CLI. It's just like designing an API for your application. Like it's thoughtful, it's intentional, it's hard work to do it right. And it comes from a lot of experience of seeing what doesn't work right.
Yeah, it was cool. Like that environment variable task. When you upload, like in Hatchbox, if you're deploying your app and you have a custom script that you want to run after deploy, maybe you want to notify Honeybadger about your deployment or Skylight or whatever it is. We often want those environment variables there so that you can reference them. Which Hatchbox release is it? What version is it? What Git revision is it? So we put those in environment variables for you. And then in the past, we ran the ASDF vars command to get those available for your script to run. And I was initially looking at Mies and I was like, oh crap. I'm going to have to like source this file, or maybe that's why we'll have to keep our script around and still run that. But sure enough, I was, oh, here, Mies env. There we go. And it exports everything for me. And it was just a drop-in replacement for the ASDF vars. And I was like, no way. This is so awesome. It is pretty cool. I think the interesting challenge of upgrading this internally in Hatchbox is, since we're not using Docker where everything's just blown away and started from scratch, what we have is applications that are currently running with ASDF. And if you decide to add a new process to it, we need to actually retain the ASDF stuff and continue using that. But when you do a new deployment, then we can say like, okay, this time we're going to install the gems and everything using Mies. Then we are going to have to convert your systemd processes over to use it as well, and then restart them like we always do at the end of the deployment process. But when we restart them, we need to make sure that they've been modified as well to point to the new shims directory and stuff. And so it'll be an interesting thing. The only one thing we cannot solve is the user's shell. When they SSH in, bash RC is going to have one or the other that is going to be first on the path that finds the languages. And so we'll end up, once you've started with one, you'll end up with Mies as the default. But all these stuff inside systemd is still going to point to whichever currently is running. But that'll make it a nice, slowly upgradable process where you just need to basically deploy your app one at a time, and everything should stay the same way. We'll just know internally in our database, this has never been deployed and upgraded to Mies. And so then when the next deploy does, it can go, but it's on ASDF and you change the environment variables. We don't want to put the other new Mies location on the server, because then the existing app is going to reboot and not see any of the changes because we put a new file that it doesn't know how to read. That was probably the bulk of the transition code that I had to write the last couple days. And so it'll be pretty interesting to like make sure we hit every edge case and caught every little thing like that. But it's really not a whole lot. It's just those little things where you're like, actually, I realize that I have to keep track of every existing application, keep them using the old process, run the new process anytime we want to engage in that, and then mark this thing has been migrated successfully afterwards. And if it fails, we need to keep it on the old thing so that it doesn't break or whatever in a weird state. Those are the things that when you're building software, like you see a company like Slack and you're like, well, they haven't added new features in years. This is why, because they ended up with architecture internally that they had to migrate between libraries, tools, whatever it is, architectures, and the glue code to transition that stuff takes a whole lot of time. And then maybe that stuff can never go away. And then you're just left with a ton of complexity. Ideally, you force everybody to upgrade, but it's not always possible. And that, I think, is one of those things where like that's where you see a lot of apps, businesses really, they slow down in productivity, quote unquote, because of that, because that is probably one of the hardest challenges. And you can go through all these tutorials and stuff, but until you run into something like this in the real world, it's, oh my gosh, I had no idea it was that hard to move one thing to another.
I don't know if you've ever seen it. I couldn't find it. I just was looking for it. I saw a diagram once, and it was just a flow chart that indicated whether or not you would receive a notification on Slack. It was like one of their internal documents, and it was huge. Wild.
Did you know that downtime costs $427 per minute on average for small businesses and up to $9,000 per minute for medium-sized businesses? That's every single minute. Honeybadger helps you avoid costly downtime and saves you money by combining error tracking, performance monitoring, uptime monitoring, and more into one easy-to-use platform, helping you fix outages faster than ever. Best of all, Honeybadger is free to get started, and setup takes as little as 5 minutes. Be sure to bookmark honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io. I remember that was from 10 years ago, too.
Yeah, it was like, a while ago.
Guarantee you that is twice as bad, if not more. these days.
Yeah.
Because the amount of devices you get, and the more settings they end up adding and whatever else just complicates the hell out of that. Yeah, I used that diagram in one of my talks. Can't remember.
Maybe you're the one I found it from.
Speaking of talks, Tropical on Rails is first week of April. Then I'm going to Philly for a site visit between that and Sin City Ruby, which is the second week. It looks like I'm going to be home for like a day or two and then go to Philly and then be home for a day or two and then go to Vegas. So April is going to be a busy month.
We'll be together at Vegas. I was going to drive and then I looked at flights and they were only like a little over $100.
Oh, that's cheap.
And then I did the calculations. Okay, it would be more money to drive if you factor in wear and tear on the car. So
sure.
I think I spent around $200 to fly both ways there and back to Vegas. I was like, I'm going to do that because gas is going to be like $250, $300 at minimum, not including wear and tear. I'm excited for that 30, 45 minute flight.
Yeah, those are the best flights. I was booking flights. One thing that annoyed me was one of the sites showed the total or whatever for round trip. And then it was like Southwest was like, here's the price, but only for one leg.
Yes.
And then you have to add it up at the end. And I was like, I know you guys do this on purpose because it makes it feel like it's cheaper. But it came out that Southwest, at least from St. Louis, didn't have nonstops to wherever I was booking. And I was like, well, you're going to charge me like $200 more and I have to go stop somewhere else. And it's an 8-hour thing of flying versus a 3-hour. No way.
Have you ever skip lagged? No? I'm not endorsing anything, and this is not advice. We are not lawyers. Not a lawyer. Skip lagging is when, okay, I want to fly to Charlotte. I book a flight to Boston. The layovers in Charlotte.
Okay.
It's a cheaper flight than flying straight to Charlotte. And so you just get off, and the airlines do not want you doing that. I don't know what the consequences are. I guess if you're a repeat offender, they will do something about it. Maybe if they catch you, but my little brother was like, I don't understand. Like, why is it so much more expensive? And I'm like, yeah, here, just do this XYZ. Then just don't get on the flight there. Just get on the flight here instead.
It's just garbage business practices.
Yeah. It's literally just them charging a premium for a one-way flight. That's literally what it is for no stops.
It's so stupid.
The reason they're upset about it is not only are like you getting cheaper flights, that's part of it, but the other part is because you don't get on one of those flights, they could have put another passenger in there, and that makes them even more mad. Because
that makes sense.
Could have sold that seat and made money, and so we lost all this money because of you.
Well, actually, if you just let me do the one direct flight in the first place, you could have sold that seat and probably been fine.
Like a 50% difference, sometimes more. It's like, okay, well, this makes no sense.
And there clearly was a premium for the longer flight or whatever than what they would have sold on the other or whatever. And so they were like, oh, more profit there.
I spent the week doing Stripe stuff, so I don't have a ton to talk about because just Stripe stuff. I think I went like 50 iterations through Stripe checkout to finish this.
Oh, interesting. Was it a week or two ago, a couple weeks ago? Occasionally I'll get on calls with Stripe research people and stuff, and they wanted to hear how we were using checkout, which you reminded me of. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but on Hatchbox, the goal is for it to be about $10 a month per server. But the simplest option to implement is we set up like a cron job to periodically report usage to Stripe. And just for the simplicity, as we do by the second, I mean, we could probably round up to the hour or something, but then it gets painful because if I spin up a server for 30 minutes, then do we charge you nothing? Do we round up to the nearest hour, whatever? But then that just gets more complicated. So we're just like, if we just do it by the second, we're not going to have these rounding things at all. But that makes our pricing, when you actually get to Stripe, the displayed pricing is 0.000001 whatever, because I just took the average 700 and Heroku does this too, where it's 720 or 730 hours a month is their average that they do, because February is weird and every month has different lengths. But I had the fun of showing the Stripe people that I assume that you don't have a lot of customers that have a situation like this. If you just gave me an API endpoint when I could hit and say, create the server and start billing for it and stop billing for it, and you just did that when you generate your invoices and like calculate all that usage for me, that'd save me a whole ton of time. I wouldn't have to run this cron job. I wouldn't have to do any of this calculations. And also, one of the problems is it's usage, right? So it's whatever million seconds used per month if you have 4 servers running, but we don't have an individual line item for each one of the servers. We have one line item that's like, you used 4 million seconds this month. And this would be so much easier if you just gave me an option to like, here's a thing, bill for it for time. I'll tell you when to start and when to stop. And we'll see. Hopefully that eventually comes out as a feature in Stripe. But apparently they don't have many people doing hourly billing like that. Seems like a lot of credit-based stuff. And you guys are mostly doing one-time purchases, or I guess
subscriptions,
payment plans and subscriptions.
It's very much like a subscription-driven thing.
Yeah.
Which has
and not like
some of the Stripe subscription
credits,
stuff really.
None of the metered billing type stuff.
No. What's metered billing?
No. Metered billing's like what I was saying with seconds used or hours used this month.
Nope. One time you pay us a fee and we give you all the features on one of the plans you choose. And we have a free trial system that I wrote.
With the free trials, do you collect payment method up front or?
See, that's kind of where I had to get brought in this week on, because no, we do not. That forced me and my project partner, Diego, to come up with some very creative solutions.
Do you guys still accept PayPal?
If you are selling a course, you can connect your PayPal and then your students can check out with PayPal. But
not for subscriptions?
No, it goes to Stripe.
Yeah. And this may be a thing, is like Stripe still doesn't support PayPal in the US as a payment method, but they do in the EU. So it's one of those things that I'm sure is a business problem, not a technical problem in the US. But that was one thing I always wanted to have, so I could just have everything happen in Stripe on Stripe checkout and implement one thing, maintain one thing. And the subscriptions are awful in PayPal, because if you want to change your payment method, it's not possible. The PayPal docs are like, go to this very hidden link to manage your subscription. What in the world? So I don't know how they ever imagine that competing. If you're PayPal, like, what is happening with that? Why don't you give business people and developers the tools to build just a normal freaking checkout and subscription management thing? It's nuts.
To me, it's not what PayPal's main business model is, I guess.
Yeah, but I feel like they're acquiring Braintree and everything. They were
they must be
competing with
something.
That.
Yeah,
but
it's interesting period that Stripe even allows you to connect PayPal, because I remember that being like a real annoyance of mine. Like, I wish I could just push the like you can press the Apple Pay button on the Stripe elements to use Apple Pay. Like, I just want to like use the PayPal instead of having to write a whole separate line of conditional logic for when they want to use PayPal. Yeah.
The other super annoying thing is in Stripe checkout, you can enable like we have it's $100 or $99 in US, but it'll automatically convert that for a one-time payment to euros or pounds or whatever, which is sweet, because then it's just whatever it is at the time, we'll change it. But for subscriptions, understandably, they don't do the automatic conversions. You have to manually set a price. I just wish that you could just set that price dynamically whenever they sign up. So it's the equivalent of $99 a month in whatever currency it is. And then that customer pays that exchange rate. And it might change every customer as things fluctuate or whatever. But maybe that is the problem, is they don't want that to fluctuate at all or whatever, but they don't allow you to go edit and add more currencies later on or whatever, which is the main issue I have is, okay, yes, I set that we want to accept pounds or whatever, but I didn't set euros. So now I have to create a whole new price in Stripe just to add euros and then migrate these people between the plans with a prorated, hopefully $0 change for everybody, but it's going to be on the thing in the invoices and people are going to ask about it and they're like, what happened here? Well, I can't explain in customer support. Well, because Stripe doesn't allow us to like add euros, we wanted to offer this for other customers. This doesn't affect you at all, but it just happens to show up in the thing because we did this internal thing in the back end. It is not a fun time.
I keep getting annoyed in Stripe because I have a subscription that I want to do something with, and instead I have to cancel it and make a whole new subscription. And that's happened to me multiple times over the course of things I've been doing in Stripe, and it happened to me again. And I'm just like, I'm annoyed by this.
Yeah, I forget why I ran into that. Some situations definitely run into that. I know that they're aware of it, but billing sounds easy. Subscriptions sound easy, but they are a freaking nightmare. It's another reason why people are like, talk about SaaS being so hard. It's because, well, this person had some weird situation. They went unpaid. And then now we have to deal with, do we charge them for the time? Were they getting value out of the product when they had those few days that they didn't pay and then it went canceled and then they went to update their card? It's just so complicated.
Especially if
there are just so many situations.
If you're listening for these webhooks and then doing stuff in your app when it gets canceled, you got to be careful, dude. You got to be real careful there. I found like a race condition, I think, that we were seeing with the webhooks. And so I was like, let's move some of this potentially destructive stuff to like a back off job that will recheck everything then to see if we actually want to do this when we will have the data in a better place.
Yeah.
I think that's something I kind of want to start doing more, is pushing a lot more of that stuff to the background.
I think they rolled this out, but the webhooks now you can opt in or whatever, configure the webhooks to only send basically like the status and the ID or whatever, and none of the actual data in there. I learned that the hard way, where it was like, I would send like created and updated and stuff to the same function just to sync our record. And so sometimes updated would get processed first, then created, and then you end up with the original values, which something happened and like the card didn't go through or whatever. So then it looks like maybe the subscription was marked as unsuccessful, even though it was eventually because a retry worked or something, and things came in and out of order and screwed up your data. Just grab it, grab the ID, hit the API, and ensure that you always have the latest values. And those things you have to learn the hard way.
I was doing some of that too because of that exact same reason. I changed a few things once I was testing it. I need to just retrieve it from Stripe again because there's a bunch moving on at this point. The created webhook may have come in, but the updated one might not have come in. So like the data in our database not be in the state I wanted in when I want to do this other thing. And when this other thing happens, it triggers new webhooks to come in, and I don't want those to get. Then when I go to check something later, I want those records to have been updated before it's just a mess. It's not like a mess of our code. It's just, you really got to like think through the implications of some of the changes you make of like, okay, well, now we're going to do this here instead. And finding the correct Stripe webhook, I think sometimes I like lean towards a more generic, like an updated or a created, when I actually, if I use a more specific one, at that point, I will have all of the information I need instead of trying to do things conditionally when certain things come in created and updated.
I agree with that a lot. You reminded me too of like in the PageM where we do all this stuff as best we can. And when you want to do a custom webhook listener, say a subscription was canceled, you will add that webhook listener and then expect that you can like just query the database for the statuses of these records and stuff. So we originally, I think it was just by accident, but the active support notifications, I think they run in order. So there was something that happened where in our initializer in the Rails engine, you could end up setting your webhook listener to run before ours did, which meant that when you see like subscription canceled, the record in the database hasn't been processed by pay yet. So the status of the subscription was still active, not canceled. You run your webhook thing doing all that. Well, actually, the data's not right. What happened? So those even have to be like done in order. And man, is it tricky. There was something else you reminded me of too, but I don't remember now. There's just so much complexity with it all that seems so simple, but literally somebody goes through Stripe checkout. And if they like create a subscription, you've got a checkout session created, a customer updated because the address for the billing or shipping was added to the customer. Then they added a payment method. Well,
invoices,
those events,
charges.
Subscription created. Then the subscription was updated because it became active because it was originally incomplete or whatever. And they're waiting for payment method. And
here's the best one.
God.
Even if the checkout session is not complete, they still send the subscription created event.
Yeah, because the subscription now can be incomplete.
Yes.
Which is fascinating.
Even if they like start the checkout and then just, never mind. You get a created event.
It makes sense. You need all those things to do this, but it's one of those things that you didn't realize the complexity there until you got in and you were like, my goodness. Stripe used to be, we just take payments. And if you want to charge them every month, you can. Good luck. That's fine. And then they started the adoption of, well, what if we could try and pull in the complexity and handle some of that for you? Well, unfortunately, the amount of stuff they have to expose for you still as the developer, they weren't actually really able to abstract near as much as I'm sure they were hoping. So,
yeah, well, all of this talk has made me stop thinking about this podcast and start thinking about my PR that I need to like work on. So I think I'm good to call it right here.
Yeah, that sounds good. I've got more Mies code and testing to do and stuff, but I'm hoping that we ship next week or something. But
that'll be cool.
It's been very timely that we were digging into it last week. And I was like, you know what? Let's go see what happens. And sure enough, it was one of those things, just like the Stripe, where it started off, oh, we just swapped these paths and we're done. And then you get into the weeds and you're like, actually, order of operations really freaking matters.
Especially in the shell.
Time editing this.
Update from last week. I've been still playing Cyberpunk. I got my desert girlfriend, bro. Let's go.
Yeah, dude, so that game's good. I need to play it again. It's been a long time. I played through the main story and then a while later played through the DLC, and that was good and just meant to come back and play it again. They got made fun of super hard when it came out because it was kind of crappy. But now it's like Grand Theft Auto investment into it where they've fixed everything. They've added so much good stuff to it.
I've only had one bug. One time the game got stuck and crashed because of a weird collision thing I did, but that's the only issue I've had at all in the several hours I've played. I'm going to buy the expansion because you were talking about that last week. I don't have that. I had to figure out what would happen in the expansion, what this is going to impact with me and my girl. And I didn't like it. So I was like, I don't know if I want to do this.
I don't even remember how much of the story got intertwined or anything. So
not a ton, but there's implications. I want to have fun playing the game. I don't want to struggle. So I'm the type of I'll look up the builds. If I'm stuck on a mission, I'm not just going to be stuck. I'm going to go look it up and see what people suggest. And I play the game differently than everyone else. So it's fun though.
I'm with you on that. I'm playing these video games because I need to relax. I don't need to be stressed out about some impossible thing that is a real pain. Some of the bosses or whatever in games can be insane. And it's well, I'm not really down to spend 8 hours grinding this one boss. That doesn't, for one, I don't have 8 hours to spend playing that. Not at a time, at least, like I used to.
I don't have time to search the whole map for the good weapons and stuff. So I'm just gonna Google, see what's going on. But I kind of want to restart my game now that I'm a bit into it.
That was one of the things I wanted to do is play one of the other what do they call them? Street Kid and
the Corpo.
And
yeah.
Whatever. I just wanted to play one of the other ones that was maybe the most opposite of what I played the first time, just to see what changed. The trouble is, I think a lot of times it's just minor stuff here and there, not a major chunk of the storyline being different.
I think the
maybe there is more of that.
Character build would be the biggest difference. Because if you are like a sword player, because I don't do the sword stuff, and people who play with swords, they're like, it's almost too easy. They have a completely different style of gameplay than I do. And it's like, oh, that's really interesting. I could play the same game, but completely differently and have like a completely different experience.
That is dope. I definitely played the hacker sneaking around, go trigger whatever thing on
not me.
This guy's
cyber, I have
nonsense.
I said it last week that I'd given up on my sniper recon ideas of myself. And so I took it a little more extreme, because instead of scouting around certain places to sneak in and like get inside a building, I just run a truck through the front gate and just pop out and show them. So
I love it.
All right. We'll catch you next week after more Stripe and more Cyberpunk adventures.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll catch you then. Whenever you join my Zoom call.
Yep, whenever I join your Zoom call, bro. You'll know it's time to record, which will be a different time for me next week, which I need to remember.
Yeah, sounds good.